Hey guys, welcome back to the Hybrid Athlete channel. I am Dr. Paul Rimmer, and today I'm going to do a follow-up video from my Instagram post, which is 5 reasons that you are not getting stronger. Now, I know most people, me included, have the attention span of a fish. So what we're going to do is blast through these 5 things really quickly, and then I'm going to come back, loop back around, and then go into a little bit more depth. So you only need to hang around for a minute or so to get the basic information. So what are these 5 things? Number 1, you are not following a strength training program. Most people think they're training strength, particularly from endurance sports. They're not training strength. Number 2, you are following a strength training program, but what you're doing is you're taking too big a jump between loads. Our bodies can only adapt to the stimulus that's placed upon them, and unfortunately those adaptations are very slow and graded over time. Unfortunately, the load that we're trying to lift is outside our realms of capability, and therefore we can't develop the right amount of stress because we can't get the reps. Number 3, you've got bad technique and or weak point. Most of our initial strength gains are basically down to technique and coordination. So therefore, if you've got bad technique and you've learned those bad habits, then strength isn't going to progress. By weak points, what I mean is, let's say in a squat, you've got good, strong legs, but you've got a weak lower back. Well, guess what? You're probably going to have to do some isolated work on your lower back so that it can actually take part in the drive out the whole of a squat. Number 4, you're outside your Goldilocks zone. By Goldilocks zone, what I mean is that you're either doing too little training with too many gaps between training, so we create a stimulus, we get this amazing training adaptation, then we rest too long and we start to get this detraining effect, or we're not doing enough to cause enough stimulus to cause the body to adapt, or on the other side of it, we jump in straight away day one with this really high volume, really high intensity training program, and we're doing that really frequently across the course of a week, and then we can't actually recover enough to then keep making those incremental improvements in our training because we're just constantly in a state of fatigue. Now, this isn't going to lead into overtraining. I've done a video on overtraining before in strength sports and how it's not really a thing. In fact, in many sports, it's very rarely been demonstrated. It's a different thing for a different time. But the point I'm trying to make is that quite often a lot of people keep spinning their wheels because they won't back away, monitor their training, monitor their progression, and figure out where the Goldilocks zone is between enough training at the right intensities to create the right stimulus versus just in the gym all of the time spinning their wheels and not making any progress. Number 5, you're not willing to do the other work. How's your nutrition? Are you eating your protein recommendations? Are you fueling your performance correctly? Are you limiting alcohol intake because that can have an effect on your recovery and muscle growth, things like that? Are you getting adequate amount of sleeps? Are you doing other things in terms of recovery, lifestyle, stress management? All of the things that add up to those very small percentages that really matter. The closer you get to that ceiling, the more attention we need to pay to those things, not the less attention we need to pay to them. So now let's loop back around and go into these in a little bit more detail. And by a little bit more detail, I do just mean a little bit more detail. So if you've made it this far, thank you. Please continue to keep watching because there might be some little gems in this. But if not, then I'm sorry, all right? I'm sorry, I'm doing my best. So what do we mean by a strength training program, and what do you mean by strength? Now, we can get strong across a number of different rep ranges. Fundamentally, a lot of people, they don't make progress in the gym because they go in, they don't follow a structured program, they don't log their workouts, they don't understand the adaptations that they're trying to elicit from training. I've done a full strength workshop about this, talking about strength and aesthetics, so please give that a watch. I'm going to clip that down into smaller components, so I'm not going to get too much into the mechanistic stuff here. And in fact, even in that, I don't get too much into the mechanistic stuff because it does get incredibly complex. But the point is, if you're not doing any heavy work with good technique, with a progression within that training, i.e. adding reps, adding sets, changing loads or increasing loads over time, then all you're doing is going in and just having a workout. You might as well just be doing circuit training or something non-specific. Now, as a beginner, you might get away with this, but if you are serious about maximizing your strength potential, we have to figure out what it is that strength training is, i.e., between 1 and 5 reps. Most of your training will be between 3 and 5 reps. It's got to be progressive in terms of either you've got with the load or the sets or the reps, and it has to be with, if you're an athlete, it has to be with movements with some carryover into your sport. So, we have to think about those things as well. Quite often, I work with a lot of endurance athletes. They think strength training is going and doing a circuit class. It's muscular endurance training. You'll get some base level of strength, but it's not strength training. So if you are following a strength training program, go and find a decent one. It might be a bit boring doing 3 to 5 sets of 3 to 5 reps and taking hours to do it. But unfortunately, you want to get strong, that's what needs to be done. So, number 2, taking too big a jump between loads. There's a thing called the SAID principle, which is the specific adaptation to the imposed demand. Okay, SAID principle. Basically, to summarize this as quickly and easily as I can, if we want to cause an adaptation in the body, there has to be a stress that causes a response that we get an adaptation from. Now, if we have too much stress, as in, let's say we were to go and try and squat 1,000 pounds. Now, if you're watching this and you can squat 1,000 pounds, I don't know why you're here. But let's say you can squat 1,000 pounds, you put it on your back, there's too much stress, it breaks you, right? You collapse through the floor, you might hurt yourself really badly. If you're lucky, the worst you'll do is just bail without any injury, right? So in order to build up to that, we have to cause micro stresses over long periods of time that accumulate, that we recover from, adapt to, and then we get bigger and stronger or whatever it might be. When you first start out, quite often, because you're getting adaptations which are quite neurological in nature and getting strong quite quickly, you will find that you can make quite big jumps in load once your technique is dialed in. But after a period of time, after a few months of training, quite often what you will find is that people are too afraid to just take out the little small plates and just add those things on over and over time. Because if you're doing, let's say, 100 kilo bench press and then you jump to 110 kilos, the chances are that if you're training in 3 to 5 rep ranges, like, you're not going to be able to do a rep. It's too big of a jump. So in that situation, it's intuitive to say go to 105, but it's not as intuitive to say go to 105 to 102.5 or 102.5 to 101 kilos. So it's why I'm a big fan of micro loading plates, particularly if people have had a long history of strength training, particularly if it's at rep ranges where adding another rep is a considerable amount of volume. I'm going to say that again. We're adding another rep is still a considerable amount of volume. So if we equate volume that we're lifting to our physiological stress, if you do a set of 5 reps at 100 kilos, and then you go and do 5 reps at 110 kilos, okay, that's an extra 50 kilos of volume. That's over a 10% increase in load on the bar. That's a lot for your body to adapt to. And it might be so much that you can't even then lift it with good enough technique for the number of reps to cause the adaptation to move forwards. Now, if that doesn't make sense, you have bad technique. We've talked about this before. Like this. Most of the adaptations that we get in the first period of training are neuromuscular, so coordination, neural drive, rate coding. Rate coding is just the rate at which our rate coding, is that right? I'll go with it. The rate at which our neurons fire, and that increases the amount of force potential that our muscles have. There's lots of anatomical differences, which mean people will have a variation on what a good technique should look like, and some people might have what looks like an ugly technique, but it works for them. The chances are, though, that most people who are just gym goers trying to get stronger, the chances are that if you have bad technique, it's probably just bad technique, right? If it's something that looks like it's outside this envelope of function. So if we can visualize what a squat or a deadlift looks like, or a bench should look like, and when we sort of look at it through slightly squinted eyes so it's a bit blurry, we should still get the silhouette of the movement, right? That's how you've got to think about technique. And there comes a point as well where the best strength athletes in the world will know when they're failing lifts what it is in their kinetic chain, hips, knees, ankles, back, mobility. They will know what it is that is causing them to struggle to get into good positions to be most efficient. You have to think about technique and lifting and identifying weak points. Almost like, I always describe it as like, I don't know if you've ever played golf or tennis or any sport that you don't play very often. And if you play them often, then great, but you might relate more to that. You'll hit a shot or you'll do something and it feels right. Like if you're a fighter and you throw a punch, it feels right. If you play rugby and you kick a conversion and you hit it and you just know instantly. You play tennis, you hit a sweet shot. Whatever it is, I'm sure you can relate to that feeling of like just it happening perfectly. And it's the same with lifting as well. Like you will know with experience when it's a good rep or a bad rep and be able to figure out what the technical flaws are, or where you keep breaking down in the chain. So if we've got a sticking point in our bench press, for example, we don't just keep benching with that same sticking point. We have to find a way to overload that portion of the repetition, because if we're strong in the lower part and we're strong in the lockout but we're weak here, then yes, we can do things like back off sets where we do higher volume. We try and develop that part of the movement. We're probably going to have to do some specific training to work that part of the movement, but also figuring out what muscle groups is it that are really letting us down. Like, is that the point where the triceps kick in a little bit more and it's the chest is nice and strong, but where we need that little bit of help from the triceps to lock it out, the triceps start to fail us. Okay, so we have to be able to target and identify those things, and that's where good coaching comes in. Okay, again, talked about this before, Goldilocks zone. This ties back in with that SAID principle, but also this is more the recovery component. So if you create a nice big training stimulus and then you rest for 2 weeks, or you don't do any strength training for weeks, because then all of that strength is going to dissipate fairly quickly. I can't remember the exact numbers by which strength the disappearance of strength and muscle after you've subsist from training. It's and to maintain it I'll do a video on that at some point. It's just fell out of my head right now, and to be honest, I'm in a flow, so I'm just going to finish this off. I'll do a video on that as well, about deconditioning from different adaptations, how long they take to fade. But generally speaking, that it won't fade super fast. But if you're doing 1 week strength training and then you get distracted, you go on holiday, you have a big endurance block, chances are you're not going to maintain any of that strength. You're not going to cause an adaptation. And on the other side of the coin, if you're doing loads of strength training, loads of strength work, loads of endurance work, really high volume work, or even if you're just a pure strength athlete, you're just doing training 6-7 days a week, really high intensity, all the way to failure, blasting yourself, you'll find that for a few weeks you'll get a good stimulus and a good response in terms of strength. But then you're just going to end up spinning your wheels, because the recovery part of that component is something where we've got to find our sweet spot or our Goldilocks zone, called enough stimulus, good recovery, adaptation. Not good stimulus, too much recovery leads into deconditioning because the stimulus has been removed, and then we get back to where we were. Or good stimulus, good stimulus, no recovery, and then we fall off the other side of the cliff where we just feel like we've got to keep adding volume, because the higher the volume the better, which is something that is highly questionable. And it used to be that like volume was the key determinant of muscle growth, and that is true. Volume, increasing volume, is a determinant of muscle growth. However, you can train with too much volume. And finally, just to go through this again, look, we aren't willing to do the other work. Are you willing to turn off Netflix before that final episode to get an extra 30 to 60 minutes in bed? Are you willing to watch alcohol intake? And this is particularly, like I say, for particularly people who are more advanced lifters. Are you willing to limit alcohol intake so that you've got better recovery, better quality of sleep? Alcohol can impair glycogen synthesis. Alcohol can impair muscle protein synthesis, so the recovery of muscles and the development of muscle tissue, muscle hypertrophy, in high amounts. Odd beer here and there, fine, whatever. But if you're out on the lash every weekend, then are you going to get stronger? Yes, to a point. You might have good genes for it, so you can blag your way through it, and it might never have an impact. What I'm talking about here is maximizing our strength for people who are really struggling with that. And again, if you're ticking all the other boxes that I've talked about in the first 4 points, then 5 is normally where the secret sauce lies, okay? And that includes things like nutrition. Are you eating enough protein? How much protein do you need? 1.6 grams per kilogram of lean body mass. Generally, if anyone's hitting 1.5 grams per kilogram of body weight, then they'll be fine, because most people aren't walking around at sub 10% body fat. Bigger people, then obviously that doesn't mean they're having to eat like 700 grams of protein a day if someone's really overweight. So 1.5 grams per kilogram is a good one to aim for. Personally, if you're combining this in like a hybrid style like I do, and I've talked about nutrition for hybrid athletes on another video, I would always push that a little bit higher, up to 2 grams per kilogram, because endurance work also needs more protein to help the body recover, and the science is going to go that way. Understand our diets to see where any gaps are. I don't eat oily fish, so therefore I use omega-3 supplements. Figuring out what supplements we might need. For example, creatine. I have a pot over there, but it's not a brand I really like to use, to be honest. I'm not going to diss a brand. The reason I've got it is because they give me a free sample of it, and it's just in capsule form, and I hate capsule creatine. Just take the powder. That's why I didn't show you guys it, but I got some free samples of it. It's okay, decent product, but it's just a lot of capsules to take, and I didn't want people to think, use that, because Dr. P does. Don't. Just get creatine monohydrate from anybody. Pure creatine monohydrate. And so that's it. That's the 5 things that you can do. You might be doing 1 of them, you might be doing 2 of them, you might be doing 3 of them, but if you're not doing all 5 consistently, then chances are that's why you're not getting stronger, or you've maximized your strength potential. And if you've got loads of those things that you can focus on, then that's great, because that means that your strength potential has gone from where you are and where you're currently stuck to being absolutely huge. And if it's one thing that we like, it's to go from being relatively small to relatively huge, right? It's why we're here. There's lots of innuendo in there. I'll let you make your own jokes in there. Right, guys, if that's been useful, please give this video a like and a subscribe, and I will be back with you very, very soon. So whatever it is you're doing, wherever it is you're doing it, be good, take it easy, peace.